My name is Dr. G. Welcome to That's Unusual, my podcast uncovering the unusual stories behind the world's most interesting people. On this show, we celebrate what makes us different and how we convert those differences into unexpected opportunities. Welcome to That's Unusual and part 2 of my conversation with the one and only Dr. Alex Haddad. Last week, we talked about many things, including his book, The Feast of Our Life, and how to redesign our lives as a love story. How to build a personal board of directors, how to overcome your fears, and how to live a healthy and happy life full of love with no regrets, and much, much more. Believe it or not, that was just scratching the surface. It was deep, inspirational, personal, and life-changing. Needless to say, I was deeply impacted by his story, as I hope you were too. If you did not catch that episode, I suggest you go back and listen to that episode first, and then come back to this week's episode. This week, on part 2, Alex and I continue the conversation where we left off. We discuss his life work and movement to reimagine the definition of health, not just as the absence of disease, but also being inclusive of our entire well-being, such as love, happiness, and no suffering. We have lots of ground to cover on this episode, so with that, let's get started. As we talked about before, looking back at generations, what was the influence and how do we pass things along? You've certainly had some transformational moments from your grandfather, from what I understand in stories that you've told me. Can you take us a little bit back into, your life as a child and the influences that your grandfather has provided you as a physician being out in Colombia?
Yeah, and my mother as well, and my father and others. Anyway, I would like to start with my mother first, okay? Because she has dementia now, and I would like to pay homage to her. Beautiful, smart woman, and it's very humbling to see somebody so special in her situation. She said, remember that you have been loved, okay? Mm-hmm. And you're not going to like things throughout your life. Resist the temptation to complain. Just take the first step. That's the most important one. Okay? My grandfather, I'm going to be a bit rude here, was a philosopher physician. Mm-hmm. I was 7 or 8, and he was coming very serious looking. And I'm going to be very horrible here, okay? But I think this captures a lot of what I've been trying to say. He said, sure. Alex, don't trust yourself. He said, Grandpa, how could you say that to me? I said, don't trust yourself. I said, Grandpa, why are you saying that? He said, I thought I was going to pass some wind, and I just pooped in my pants. Okay? So beware of when you feel certain about something. Okay? Mm-hmm. Okay? So very, very powerful.
It is.
But then the most disturbing thing that I got from him was the last thing he said with his own voice. He was an amazing obstetrician surgeon. He had thousands of disciples who learned medicine from him. And then he developed arthritis in his 50s. So his fingers became very stiff. He couldn't operate. So he had to guide his students through the operations. Then he developed Parkinson's and had a stroke. So it was necessary to take him to the operating theater that he built to have a tracheostomy. Okay? And he had a big entourage with him. And then before he was going into the operating theater, he raised his hand. And everybody stopped. And this is what he said. That's the last thing we heard him say with his own voice. Because after that, he had a tube down his trachea. He said, if you reach 60 years of age and don't feel well, shoot yourselves. This was horrible. We realized that we had not pressed the pause button. We had not asked him how he felt, how he wanted to live the rest of his life. What could we do to enable him to make his life full, despite all the challenges he was facing? We were treating him, you see. as we would treat most patients, you see, in a very paternalistic or patronizing way.
Yeah.
We disempowered him, and we were horrified to realize that in the name of love, we probably did more harm than good. So once again, it is important, essential, to give ourselves a break, to be more deliberate about what we mean by love, and to pause and to be urgently patient. Because sometimes, or most of the time, more doesn't mean more. See, we need to accept our insignificance. We need to accept that we cannot avoid the inevitable, that we cannot control things, that we have very little room, very little wiggle room. And that wiggle room is given to us by our ability to perceive things differently, you see, and to choose what to feel and what to protect, and to dance with the music, or dance to the music of life. But we need to listen. We need to listen to that music, and we need to listen to ourselves.
It's such a powerful story. We all too often, and including in my personal life, I'm going through a father who has Alzheimer's and Parkinson's as well. And we oftentimes, especially in a family of doctors, tend to lose focus and focus on treating the disease and not necessarily treating the patient. And I think this has become rampant and problematic throughout our healthcare system. You've now spent in sort of transitioning to some of the work that you're doing in healthcare. You've spent a number of years in helping redefine what it means to be healthy. And in fact, you recreated the definition back in the 90s in terms of what it means to be healthy, and with a focus on well-being and incorporating elements of happiness and love into that equation. Can you tell us in your words, what does it mean, or what should it mean to be ultimately healthy as an individual?
Yeah. So in 1948, humanity created the World Health Organization. I mean, this was one of the first agencies of the new United Nations, which was created, by the way, to replace the League of Nations, which was meant to prevent another world war, because the First World War was meant to be the war to end all wars. And then we had the second, which was worse. So after the Second World War, we, humanity, created the United Nations, and we said, what could we do to show that we could be good to each other? Well, one of the things that we decided to create was the World Health Organization. But to have an organization focused on health, we had to conceptualize, we had to describe what we meant by health. So we came up with this statement, which is: health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not just the absence of disease. And that went on for more than 60 years without being changed. But again, if we stop and think, about that statement, we realize that nobody could be healthy. Who could claim to have complete physical, mental, and social well-being? Nobody. If you're wearing glasses, that means you don't have complete physical well-being. If your bladder is full, you want to pee, you don't have complete well-being. If you're worried about something, you don't have complete well-being. So that same year, the year 2008, when I had my own diagnosis of cancer, probable. At the end, I didn't have cancer, but I was told that I could have had cancer. I was there recovering from a colonoscopy, and it came to my head. I said, if I have cancer, could I still be healthy? Is it possible to be healthy even if I have diseases? And then I realized that all I knew about health was that WHO definition, the World Health Organization definition. That didn't make any sense. So with support from the British Medical Journal, the editor, we started a global conversation on the meaning of health. And it took us 3 years, Dr. G. And at the end of these 3 years, we came up with a statement that can be changed. It's not a definition, it's a conceptualization, because we cannot even define the chair. We cannot define anything. We cannot use precise words to describe something in a way that would be accepted by everybody. That's what a definition is. We can conceptualize things. We can translate ideas and feelings into words, knowing that they're incomplete, knowing that they're imperfect, that it could be changed. So by health, we are proposing now Instead of a condition that doctors would diagnose, we propose that health be an ability, the capacity that we humans have as individuals or communities to adapt and to manage the physical, mental, or social challenges that life presents us. Okay, wait. So if we have the capacity to adapt and manage any time that we face physical, mental, or social challenges, we could consider ourselves healthy. Okay? Then that is very much connected with happiness and love. Okay? By happiness, and we are borrowing from Gandhi, we are looking at over 6,000 publications now, by the way, on happiness, trying to create conceptual maps to try to facilitate conversation on this very important word. Okay? We tend to confuse it with life satisfaction. Okay, but it's not as easy. So for practical purposes now, it may have to do with what Gandhi invited us to think. He said, happiness is what happens when what we think, what we say, and what we do are in harmony. It has to do with alignment. I would like to add a fourth one before thinking, saying, and doing. I think it's extremely important to figure out what you want, what you would like to feel. Okay, more than anything else. So happiness might be what results when we align what we feel, what we think, what we say, and what we do. This is what astronomers call syzygy. Okay, it's when planets are aligned. Okay, you see, we tend not to be happy when we find ourselves doing something that we don't feel we should be doing. Okay, when we say something that doesn't match our thoughts. Okay, so that alignment is very important, and I think that alignment plays a major role in our ability to adapt and manage the challenges that life presents to us. The more aligned we are, the more able we are to feel healthy. And then if we add love to that, which is what happens when we embrace goodness, when we will good, when we do good, when we see good, and when we feel good, then that makes us, you see, more likely to be whole, to live as a full person, able to experience a full life and to enable others to do the same. So these three concepts, these three big words, health, happiness, and love, have a lot of overlaps and feed each other. And we need to cherish them, and we need to think about them very, very seriously. It's sad to see how little time we devote in our family lives to talk about health, happiness, and love as serious subjects. We don't cover them during our studies. Okay, we learn about geography, history, calculus. Okay, but we don't have time specifically devoted to how to adapt and manage the challenges that life presents us, or how to align ourselves, or how to love ourselves and others. And I think the time has come to do it.
Why do you think historically this has never been really a part of the equation? I mean, the WHO definition included mental and social well-being, but do you think there's an element of just it's difficult to really measure an element of happiness and love? And if so, how do we go about doing that?
Yeah, but
or do we need to measure it at all?
That's exactly part of the challenge that we are facing. We tend to devalue what we cannot measure. But again, if we give ourselves a break and press the pause button, we realize that most important things in our lives cannot be measured. Yeah? The truly important things are unmeasurable. Dr. G, do you love your kids?
Yes.
How much?
Of course.
Give me a number.
It's immeasurable. You're right.
Yeah.
What I will sell them to the moon and back, right?
Exactly.
Infinity.
So it's this delusion. We are full of delusions. And many of our delusions are reinforced by our feeling that by measuring things, we are in control. Okay? So I think the time has come again for us to use the power of love to liberate ourselves. And because I think that to love is to liberate ourselves and others, and to relax, and to pay attention to what is truly important, and to feel comfortable being uncomfortable, dealing with things we cannot quantify, that we cannot measure, that we cannot control, and accept that. You see, I think acceptance is a big, big, big thing that we need to cherish and nurture in our lives, acceptance of our insignificance, acceptance of the beauty of not knowing, acceptance of our mortality, acceptance of our fragility, you see, and acceptance of our ephemeral nature.
Mm-hmm. I know for years in our conversations, you've been a big follower and reader of some of the works of Ivan Illich, which talks about that we've, sort of summarizing elements of what he talks about, that we've done more harm to ourselves as a system by focusing on eradicating disease versus promoting health. And a lot of the work that you're doing today, just sort of moving now into the future, Alex, of sort of what's next, you talk a lot about the pandemic of health, and you've now established, of course, you've been, head of the Center for Global eHealth Innovation over at University of Toronto, and now you've established the Institute for Global Health Equity, and you've been looking and trying to uncover ways of, rather than focusing on how do we just eradicate disease, how do we ultimately promote health, happiness, and love. Can you tell us about some of your efforts, ongoing efforts and initiatives around that?
Yeah, and this may be a great time to pay homage to a few other folks. You mentioned Ivan Illich. He wrote a book entitled Medical Nemesis, which I think everybody should read, especially healthcare professionals. The introduction of his book starts with the following sentence: "The medical establishment has become a major threat to health." Okay, and wow, okay, and he differentiates medicine from health, and most people listening may not realize the fact that perhaps the main cause of death, avoidable deaths, is medicine. In the U.S., for sure, it seems to be. It has been estimated that about 1 million people die every year as a result of medicine. That's what's called iatrogenesis, is death caused by medicine. Side effects of medications, errors, and complications of interventions kill over 1 million people a year. This is equivalent to several jumbo jets, 7 or 8 crashing every day, full of passengers. So it's important to realize that we are living, and this is inspired by Illich, by the way, that the models that guided our lives until about the middle of last century are now turning against us. There is nothing that kills us more than our health care systems. They are not about health, they are not caring, and they are not systems. They are like inefficient franchises of repair shops. There is nothing that is making us dumber than our educational systems. Our food systems are poisoning us. Our economic models are impoverishing us. So it's time to reimagine them and to join forces to reinvent them, you see, and to enable them to contribute to full lives. So that's Ivan Illich. He wrote another book called Deschooling Society, saying that our schooling was really detrimental to our creativity, and that has inspired many other leading educators, some of them in this show. But then our work on the pandemic of health was also inspired by people like Aaron Antonovsky. This was a medical sociologist who, studying women who survived the Holocaust, realized that about 1/3 of them were thriving. They considered themselves healthy and they were happy. So instead of focusing on the 2/3 who were destroyed, he looked at the 1/3 that was doing well and asked an amazing question. He said, "What causes health? What causes health?" Wow. Okay. We have been spending most of our time thinking about what causes illness, what causes diseases. And he coined a term, salutogenesis, which is a hybrid between the Greek and the Latin, that means the creation of health. So we are now trying to figure out what causes health, how could health be created, and beyond that, how could we spread it? So that 7.5 billion, very soon 9 billion people could experience good health. And the same we are trying to do for happiness and for love, because it is clear through a growing body of research that ideas, emotions, and behaviors can be contagious. So now we have a database that includes millions of people with thousands of variables that are allowing us to get a better understanding of what are those factors that enable us to adapt and to self-manage when we are facing physical, mental, or social challenges. But we are also working with philosophers, with economists, with marketing people, with mathematicians. We are looking at emotional mathematics, for example, or mimetic engineering, trying to figure out if it is possible to build some contagious units that would allow us, to become carriers of positive virus-like entities to spread everything we cherish or value so much in our lives, such as health, happiness, and love. So we really believe that there might be a possibility to enable every human being to live a long, healthy, and happy life, full of love and with no regrets, until the last breath as part of a thriving planet.
Well, I for one, am so excited to see the output of that research and that initiative in terms of what you uncover regarding the patterns and how we can all essentially apply some of those lessons learned to ourselves to live healthier, happier.
But we need to start with ourselves, Dr. G, and within our families and within our teams and within our study places, within our companies or corporations, workplaces, offices, in our communities. And it's possible. It's possible. And we also need to acknowledge that a lot of people are having a horrible time. I mean, today, 21,000 children will die of hunger and completely unnecessarily. 1 every 4 seconds when we have so much abundance of food. So why? Again, 200 million women remain unaccounted for because, as a documentary says, somebody expressed the 3 most dangerous words in the world, which is "it's a girl." Okay, so there is so much unnecessary suffering going around when we are living in a time of so much abundance. We have so much knowledge about how to transform our energy systems and to protect the environment. We have pretty much everything that is needed to enable us all to have a full life, except perhaps a greater dose of love. Okay? So if we had to pick a priority for a pandemic, I would go for a pandemic of love, and to be really serious about this, and to assume the responsibility each of us has to ourselves first, and then to each other, and to try to make an effort that we haven't made so far, and call ourselves to our senses. I think we need to replace the United Nations. I think we need to start having a different kind of species-level conversation. Otherwise, our children will suffer even more unnecessarily. The gaps are widening, Dr. G. They are not narrowing between rich and poor. The situation of women around the world is no better. Okay? The younger generations are not going to be finding options to have a full life as some of our ancestors and many of us privileged people have had the opportunity to enjoy. So this is the time. This is the time to bet on love.
Yeah, the time is now. We have so much work to do ahead of us.
To bet on love.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we can do it. It doesn't require expensive infrastructure. It doesn't require degrees. It doesn't require money. Yeah. It requires, awareness and commitment to will good, to do good, to see good, and to feel good. And to love ourselves.
Absolutely. So my brother, before we get into, I close out every session, and this has been an amazing discussion, and we could probably go on and on. Before we get into the rapid fire sort of fill in the blank questions, I recall a conversation you and I once had that you said, once I've achieved my life's work, I will sit back and forever remain sitting on my hammock. And so you tell me, what do you still have to work on in your life's work until you're going to be sitting on that hammock?
Nothing really. Is that I really believe that the best outcome in life is dispensability, is not to be needed. Okay? So now I have a hammock in every living area where I find myself. I try to hang one. Okay? And I'm not in my hammock because I feel that I could have a lot of fun outside of it as well. But I'm done. When I delivered my granddaughter, I realized that at least biologically, I am not needed anymore. I have the privilege to supervise graduate students. Each of them has surrogate supervisors. If I die, they don't need me. My kids are off the payroll now. Martha doesn't really need me. So one of the big lessons I learned through the preparation for my death was to stop chasing. I don't chase anymore. I try to focus on each life unit as much as possible, trying to get as much joy as I can, and with no regrets. And the surprising thing is that there are lots of good side effects to that. Good things happen when you're guided by love. And St. Augustine said it. He said, love and do what you please. So if what you do is guided by love, whatever happens is bound to be good. Well,
I can't think of a better life lesson to close out than that before we get into our rapid fire questions. Alex, and before we get into the rapid fire Mad Lib questions, anything else that is sort of burning in your mind that you want to share with us? Yeah. Or if not, we'll proceed.
I would probably do it with another pause. Let's give the audience an opportunity to listen to their inner voice and to make an invitation.
Okay, let's give ourselves a 5-second pause, and then we'll jump into the rapid fire questions.
Am I ready to have a conversation with myself? Am I ready to love myself as a precursor to loving others? Let's do it. So are you ready to love yourself?
Well, I hope everyone listening takes longer than 5 seconds to ponder on that question and really dig deep. So, Alex, I'd like to, like with all my guests, I close out with a series of 5 questions, or sort of fill in the blanks. The first one being, the best piece of advice I ever received was, and I know you've talked about numerous amounts of advice that you've received over the course of your life, but the best piece of advice you ever received was?
From somebody with whom I gave a lecture. I was a kid. I did some early work on crack cocaine. I didn't even know it was called that. And I found myself as a keynote speaker as a teenager with this very old man. And I stood up in front of the audience. I chose to go first with my fancy slides at the time with a carousel, just to show this old guy how things were done by modern people like me. And I showed pictures that nobody had. I really tried to dazzle the audience, and everybody clapped at the end. And I sat very full of myself, okay? Mm-hmm. And I basically said, now your turn. And this old guy stands up with the back stiff. He straightens himself and he goes shaking to the podium and delivers the most amazing speech I heard in my life, with no technology, okay, no notes. And I was entranced. At the end, I stood up and started giving him a standing ovation. and at the end, after that, we were left alone. People forgot about us. And we found ourselves in a taxi. And that was probably the most valuable 1 hour I have had in my life up to that point. And I said, how did you do it? How did you do it? I had never heard something so beautiful, Dr. G.
What did he say?
And he was very old. I thought he was 250 or so. As a teenager, you think that old people are really, really ancient. And he gave me the most beautiful smile. And he pointed at me with his index finger. And he said, Alex, never, ever, ever let your inner child and your inner lunatic die. Nurture them. Okay? And I have done it. From that point on, they are very much alive and thriving. And I really would like to encourage those who are listening to us to do the same. What does your inner child and what does your inner lunatic need to thrive without hurting other people?
The inner lunatic. I love that. Mm-hmm. Well, great advice. All right, next one. I am most curious about...
the fear of life.
The fear of life.
Yeah. We tend to talk about a lot of fears, and I listed 5, starting with the fear of death. But I think what we fear most is life.
Wow.
And so why do we compromise so much? Why, do we refrain ourselves from so much from doing what we know we should be doing and feeling? Yeah.
Wow, that reframing just put a shiver down my spine. The fear of life, not the fear of death. Wow, fascinating. Okay, next one. If I had to write a book about myself, essentially an autobiography on yourself, the title of the book would be?
Blissfully Ignorant.
Okay, explain.
Well, we tend to give a bad name to ignorance. I think we should give it to stupidity, not to ignorance. Okay, somebody said that intelligence is our capacity to be happy. So when we are not happy, when we are not loving ourselves, we are stupid. Okay? But ignorance is amazing. And now when we are going through a period in history in which more and more knowledge is being generated, by default, we are more and more ignorant, because what we think we know, or even what we know, is a smaller and smaller fraction of what we don't know. Okay? So if we cherished our ignorance and we embraced it as a source of wonder and of beauty, we would have an unlimited supply of joyful moments instead of trying to fight it. And that's something I've been trying to do. By loving not knowing and embracing my ignorance has truly become bliss.
Wow.
Not in the negative sense that we say ignorance is bliss. Yes, ignorance is bliss. So I've been blissfully ignorant, and I hope to continue to be so, and more until my last breath.
We'll get working on that book because I want to read it. Okay, next one. If you could invite 3 people or things or anything that you like over for dinner, who would you invite and what would you talk about?
Am I allowed to turn something into a person?
You could do whatever you want. You can invite any person, thing, object you want to this dinner.
Okay, so I would like to do it in a gender balanced way. So I would invite Diogenes, the cynic, the philosopher, Empress Helena of Constantinople, and I would invite money to come as money as a person to the dinner and have a conversation with these 3 folks.
Okay, you can't leave it at that. You have to explain this.
Okay, Diogenes used to live like a dog. This is why he was called Canicos, and we call it cynic, but it's Canicos. He was detached from things. We are told he lived either in a big jar or in a cave. And when Alexander the Great came to visit his town, he said, I want to meet Diogenes. And by the way, Diogenes used to go around town with a lamp in full daylight. And people say, what are you doing? He said, I'm looking for an honest person. Okay? I'm looking for an honest person. But this man was detached from material possessions, a superhero. And Alexander the Great was brought to him, and he was in his jar, in his cave, and Alexander stands in front of him and says, I am Alexander the Great. I'm the most powerful person in the world. Ask me for anything. I could give you anything you want. And then Diogenes said, okay, I would like you to move to one side because you are covering the sun. Okay? When Alexander was leaving town, apparently he said, if I wasn't Alexander, I would like to be Diogenes. Okay? So this is a man who lived it, was coherent, and I think who, through the ages, gives us a big message about how important it is to detach yourselves. And we could be engagingly detached, you see. It's not, we can be engaged in our lives while being detached at the same time, especially of material possessions or the delusion of self-importance. Okay? So that would be one. Then Helena Helen, she was the mother of Constantine, the first Christian emperor. But I think that to protect her son, she basically built modern Christianity. And she might be the most influential woman in history. I'm looking for women who have changed history, and unfortunately, most of them have been shadowed by men in their lives or suppressed from our history books. But Helena went to Jerusalem hundreds of years after when Jesus was meant to die, and found the cross and did all sorts of things. I think she built Christianity and persuaded her son to become Christian, to save him. And as a result of that, changed the world. So she understood power. She understood the power of hope more than anybody else, and used it to her advantage and to the advantage of her own son. And so it would be very, very nice to see how somebody so attached to people and to power as she was would interact with Diogenes. And to have a man and a woman looking at the subject of power and importance would be very interesting.
Yeah.
And
then the last one, money. How does money play into this?
I would invite money. I really don't believe in the personification of Satan or evil. But every time we think of evil or satanic things, I think money has something to do with them. I think we invented it to hurt ourselves. So I would interview money to get insights as to why it's so powerful and what lessons it could give us to devalue itself, and to allow us to learn from what has made it so powerful, to value other things, as I said, as our happiness, our health, and our love. So how could we learn from money if we had an opportunity to have a conversation with it that we could apply to the things that truly matter, that are truly valuable in our lives?
That's just amazing. Never get a usual answer from you. That's why I love talking to you, Alex. So related to the last question here, I think that is just an amazing dinner that I would love to attend as well, if we could add a fourth. So of course, on this podcast, we celebrate all those things that make us unique, what makes us different. And so if you could, how would you fill in the following blank? I'm unusual because...
and I prefer unusual to unique, by the way. So thank you for that. Because of a strong interest in figuring out how the positively unusual could become usual. You see, imagine a world in which what we consider as wonderful and unusual at the same time could become normal. Imagine what would happen if we accepted our deaths, our irrelevance, if loving ourselves unconditionally would become usual.
Yeah.
That we cherished ignorance, that we realized that being dispensable is what would make us successful, not to be needed.
Yeah, I think that some of those things are what we oftentimes focus on too much is the usual stuff. And everything usual at one point was unusual before it became usual. And the question then becomes is how do we essentially get to that point of usualness, by embracing what we do that's unusual. It's kind of like everything obvious was once unobvious at a certain point in life. And so how does that transition happen? So these were amazing answers, amazing conversation. But you know what? I'm going to throw in one additional question for you. And that's because when we had first met, and this dates us back to a time when we were in Rhode Island in Watch Hill, we were a bunch of strangers who decided to have lunch together in the restaurant in the hotel. And if you may or may not recall this, but we were sitting, I think it was 5 of us sitting around the table, and we had chose to have this special lunch together, all strangers. And the typical thing as we go around is we asked ourselves the question of what do you do? And that's typically how we defined ourselves. But what was transformational, is a transformational moment in my life. You didn't ask that question. In fact, you went around and made sure that we all answered a specific question. And that question was, why are you here? Not at the event, not at the salon, not at the hotel, but why did you choose to spend this next hour, this next life unit here at this table with a bunch of 5 other strangers? And you made us go around and ask that question. It was probably one of the most provocative questions that changed the trajectory of my career and what I pursued and how I evaluated my own story life. So I want to pose that question back to you. We just spent 90 minutes having the most wonderful conversation. If we were to put that in the context of a life unit, Alex, why are you here? Why did you choose to spend this 90 minutes with me?
Now, my answer clearly would be because of love. And I would leave it like that. With a pause for our audience to ponder.
I love it. I love it. Well, it's a great way to close out. And for those listening, we talked about a bunch of stuff. Of course, we talked about your book, The Experimental Text, The Feast of Our Life. We talked about a number of things that you're working on in healthcare. There's probably, of course, you've got a Wikipedia page, but if somebody wanted to learn more about you, the work that you're doing, how to get a copy of your book, where would you direct them to go?
I'm trying to keep it simple. Alex Haddad, through most outlets, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or any search engine would do. And for a specific request, alex@beati.ca. Beati is Beati. That's our family organization through which we are trying to promote acts of love and enabling people and groups to reimagine themselves and to redesign their lives for love. So Beati, that means privileged, fortunate, blessed. Okay? So Beati, Beati.ca. Alex@beati.ca.
Okay, great. Well, there you have it, folks. And Alex, my brother, I'm sending you big virtual hugs across this microphone and across this connection. You are amazing. Thank you so much for spending the time with me today. I always learn something new talking to you, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, Dr. G, thank you very much, and I love you very much.
Love you too.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye. Hi again. It's me, Dr. G. If you are still listening, I'm hoping it's because you enjoyed this podcast. If you would like to hear future episodes, you could really help me out by subscribing to the That's Unusual podcast on iTunes and leaving a review. It goes a long way in helping me get the word out from avid listeners like you. As a thank you, I will be selecting one new reviewer each week at random for a free private 15-minute phone conversation where you can ask me anything and get professional advice on your career or business to help you stand out and make a difference. Also, if you want to be notified of any future episodes, please visit that'sunusualpodcast.com and sign up to receive updates on new episode releases. Until next time, remember to always think unusual.